Each week on the Million Dollar Flip Flops podcast with your host, me, Rodric, we talk with game changers and thought leaders from across the globe. These are business leaders that are leaving an indelible mark on our society, whether we realize it or not. No topic is off limits, from information to technology to just general business or even families and spirituality. Nothing is left untouched. We're not here just to scratch the surface. We're here to actually dive into the business mind of other CEOs across the globe and just have a conversation. But you get a front row seat to that every week. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If there's anything you would like to hear on your end or anyone you would recommend as a guest, please don't hesitate to reach out. Let's get to the show. When you can do a lot of things, how do you pick the one thing to do?
In all honesty, the one I enjoy doing. At the end of the day, that's the stuff. So whether it's been the coffee and cart series I'm doing with the golf brand now, or when it comes to any part of the business, knowing and having an aspect of it that I know it all needs to get done, but what parts do I really want to do at the end of the day? Like that's what's most important. And that's where when I started the golf business, that was most important was I just want to go start a brand and do something that I'm passionate about. Even though I'm not a professional golfer, I have the professional golfers that said, you know what, Nick, you know what you're doing on the production, the manufacturing, the branding side of things. We know golf. Let's work together because we don't know anything about that sort of stuff. So it's getting the Avengers together or whatever you might call it
Sure.
to help grow that and do that part of the business. But right now, I'm loving doing the podcast, the video cast series, and I'm loving getting out there and meeting professionals and playing more and doing all that sort of stuff. It's amazing. Like I'm so lucky. Like when I get out there and I do those sort of things, I'm just, like I said, having playing nine or just having a cruise. I'm like, man, I'm so lucky to be able to do this. But I've also put in those zombie hours or whatever you might say in a corporate world, in an office, 40, 50, 60 hours a week for, you know, 15 years at least, maybe 18 years. And again, parents and stuff like that did it for 40. So I'm not discrediting any of that, but I'm also thinking that, I've put in the time to where I've deserved this. I've earned this. And I'm happy with that. And when it comes back to the part where you talk about money being made, you know what? My big goal at the end of the day, sell this latest brand, 2, 3, 4, 5 million, invest that into a fund. I'm getting a return of $200,000, $300,000 a year. And that's all I need, man. Pays for my vacations, pays for my housing, pays for my live, allows me to do all the things that I want to do. And I need to be complacent with that because in business, it's easy to be like, oh, I made five. Now I'm going to go make 10 million. I'm going to make 50. And I've seen that where it just doesn't end. I'm
Right.
happy to make a few $100,000 a year. And then you know what? How can I help grow the game, grow the sport, or help others in my community realize those sort of things for themselves as well?
100% agree. And that concept of enough, right? And when people ask me about the people I coach now, none of them want to grow. Not one of them. They want to buy back their time. They want to be able to go to their kids' t-ball game. They want to be able to go out to the lake on a Thursday and a Friday. They understand that they only need so much. And they look at me. I could have just kept building the real estate company to infinitum, but why? I want to live in the mountains. I want to be able to do something that's virtual. And I only need so much money to bounce around in the hot rods and, go travel to Asia, go see you in Australia, whatever it is. And I can give the rest away. And people think you're nuts. And it's like, no, man, like that's not it. I don't need $200 million and I never will. It's a foreign
Yeah.
concept for a lot of people that are brought up in that Western more, better, more, bigger, more.
And I think once you've talked to enough entrepreneurs and once you've seen what it does to people and how it maybe doesn't end, and that's why I've really tried to learn from those that have made those choices of setting a finite thing of being like, you know what, this is it, and I'm cool with that. And yeah, there probably will be some consulting or being on boards or those sort of things where I'm happy to help, especially when it comes back to giving back or any of those sort of things, especially with the game of golf. Like it's really important to me to help grow the game, educate kids, start smaller competitions or communities where they may have not been able to see it because of how much the game is given to me to be able to do that. So that's important as well.
For those listening, you live in Australia and you moved, what, 15 years ago? How long have you been there?
Well, 7.
Why did I? Oh,
We'll
you
put
were
it
in San Diego before that?
we'll put it in half. Yeah, yeah. So I was
Oh,
in
okay. Okay. Okay.
San Diego for 10 years, and then moved here 7 years ago now.
Gotcha. So my timeline was close. I was just wrong location. So
It's okay.
let's take San Diego versus Australia. Like just
Yeah.
mindset, that kind of growth mentality, business, time off, the idea behind enough. How are the two different? Because I think most people, myself included, would look at Australia as kind of like we are in the States. But have you experienced it to be different?
It's vastly. I mean, there's some similarities. I mean, Australia as a whole, I would say, is a combination, and many of them probably would here too, of the UK and the US. Significant amount of influence from both. Obviously, the UK being where most of the country was established from, and the US being probably the predominant projection in news, in media, in entertainment, and those sort of things as well too. But when it comes down to actual lifestyle, I'm very surprised at probably just how much healthier this country is compared to America. And a lot of that has to do around education and regulation. So when you watch commercials here, there's a lot of support in communities, whether it's for mental health or physical health, or there's just commercials and things happening all the time of what's happening in your community, how can you be a better contributing member of society, and those sort of aspects. Also, there's lots of parks and there's lots of programs to get out and play and all those sort of things. But also, the food regulation is astronomically different. Also, we don't see pill commercials here. So when you're watching TV, there's not 37 commercials about Celebrex. You know, it's very, very different. When you go to Macca's or McDonald's as it's known in the States, our large here is the small that you get in the US. I
I
mean, it
watched that on
literally
your
tastes
cards.
different. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's literally presented differently. It's a lot of the food comes sourced from Australia for even a lot of those fast food chains, to where in the US, if you watch those documentaries, you're not sure where it comes from half of the time. So there are little things that are quite a bit different. It comes down to sports, there's no tailgating. That one's a pretty big difference. So those are just some funny little things. And at the end of the day, like I've always said, people are like, "Oh, you haven't lost your accent now." And there's things I'll say that are Australian slang or language or stuff like that when you're talking about things, because they're just so different. A trolley here is actually a grocery cart, to where in the U.S. it's a cable car or what, a tram or whatever you might call it. So there are little things that are pretty funny. And the boot is the back of a car, and to where you would call it a trunk. And sometimes I'd be like, "I'll put it in the trunk." They'll be like, "What?" Like the words that just are a little bit different and quite funny that you find from cultures, and the spelling of words and those sort of things. But at the end of the day, it is pretty similar when it comes down to mainstream media or pop culture or any of those sort of things. Obviously, they have their celebrities and their things here, but those are the things that I've taken a bit getting used to, along with the animals and the creatures that creep and crawl around here compared to the U.S. as well.
Right, right. Um, Interesting. So, I wonder from a business perspective, and maybe start in San Diego, and what business were you running there? Because I know, is that when you started the scooter brand?
Yeah, that was. So at the time I had a insurance company. So I was doing health and life insurance, which was doing pretty well until a lot of significant changes came with Obamacare. So the way that policies were structured, the way that they could be sold, the information that was in them changed significantly when that had happened, which caused a pretty big change in the industry. And again, a lot of that needed to happen, but also too, it did crush and close the business. So after that had happened, I'd been sitting with a few friends. We're fortunate enough to live on the boardwalk in San Diego. If you've ever been to Pacific Beach, incredible place, some of the best times of my life. And we're sitting out there, we're just having a beer out on the porch, or a veranda that you might call it here. And some scooters are cruising by, and a friend of mine reaches out to me and he says, "Hey man, have you seen like these things?" I'm like, "Razor scooters, like the ankle bashing things?" They're like, "Yeah." They're like, "These things are exploding in the action sports side of things." So to where you see BMX or skateboarding or any of that sort of thing, that part of that world was getting really big for scooters. So if anyone wants to familiarize yourself, just look up Ryan Williams or look up Nitro Circus, and you'll get a very good example of how big and mainstream that side of razor scooters that we rode as kids got. So we saw an opportunity to open a retail store in San Diego next to one of the large skate parks there called Claremont Skate Park, and themed it around farming. So we called it the Scooter Farm. So we had all kinds of cool animals, and we made it look like a barn inside of it. We built a little skate park for kids to come in. And the big thing for that business is I knew as a kid, and as you would know, whether you went into Reggie's bike shop or any kind of place like that, a lot of times it was just a good place away from home that you got to connect with others or kids to look up to and those sort of things. And you never know what kind of life people are living at home, especially in those early teenage years. Sometimes it can be quite difficult. So we really did provide kids a place to come, and also got down with them on a level of, we were able to talk with them and chat with them and just treated them like little adults or human beings, which everyone should be treated as and not little kids. And they loved it. And that gained international attention after a few years, got very big, and got invited to an event over here in Australia to come for some of our kids that had been sponsored to compete in a global event. At that time, I met the owner of one of the largest retail shops in the world for the business. Australia was a hub for scootering. It kind of didn't have as much of a stigma that maybe it had in the United States against skateboarders, to where there's that skier kind of snowboard
Mhm.
war, to where here it was a lot different and more accepted. And they invited me to come over and partner with them in their business. And I sold my portion of my business to my partners in San Diego at the time. So that's what brought me over to here. And I did that scooter business for up until really about June of last year, until the COVID thing kind of cleared. The business did phenomenally well throughout COVID, giving kids and parents a chance to just get their kids out of the house. Well, you couldn't go very far out of the house, but you could at least go out in the driveway or go
Right.
out into the neighborhood and cruise around with the kids in the neighborhood. And that gave them the opportunity to do that, which was phenomenally, um, was very, very big for our business, and launched a lot of sales. But once that all came to an end, parents wanted to get back to traveling and spend more of their fun and time with their kids, getting well far away from the house, which had a pretty significant impact on that industry. And then that's when I ended up going full time with the golf brand that I had started a few years earlier. But we can get into a bit more of that. I know that's a bit of a long answer there, but hopefully that gives a lot of people clarity of what that portion of the journey was.
Yeah. I think the thing that sticks out for me there, Nick, is the scooter farm being kind of a safe haven for kids. It's the idea, and hey, this thing might be able to be profitable is neat. But if you just opened up any old scooter shop with really great scooters, would it have been as successful
Probably not,
or as
because
fulfilling?
there's many that tried. There's many that tried.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what did well for us, is we treated them that way, and they celebrated us within really the rise of Instagram at that time. So, I mean, we had several hundred thousand followers within a very short period of time, because kids and people would just come in and be like, "How awesome is this place?" They're sharing the products, they're filming them purchasing from the stores, they're tagging the stores. We put up cool things all around the store for them to do selfies or photos with, or to be able to share, whether it was stuffed chickens or all kinds of just really funny, cool things that allowed them to really make it an experience. And we had people flying in from France, Croatia, Germany, Spain, Australia, South America, just for their holidays to experience our store, which
Wow.
is wild. It's wild to think about that, to where you'd have that kind of, the only other thing I would think that would have that kind of experience would be like a Ron John surf shop, right? Of our kind of growing up, of like, here's this place where someone would wear a t-shirt, and no matter where they kind of were in the world, you would know where that came from. To where when I would do travels for this business and wear the shirt, that people would be like, "Oh, that's the scooter farm." And it was very, very humbling to see that and to know, and just to be at random places in the world, be like, what the hell? Like, how do people
Right.
even, how do people even know this? And it was pretty cool, and definitely some of the more special times of my life was being able to grow that business and celebrate that time, and to see those kids now as young adults and what they've been able to come, and to receive messages from them of thank you, of treating them the way that we did at those ages, and even being able to continue to share now for some of them that still follow my story of, hey, if there's anything that I can teach you or show you, I'm more than happy. And I've got all the time in the world for the next generation, because so many people ahead of my time have had that time for me, which is very, very important.
So many questions I want to ask around the scooter farm. Do you only have the one location, or do you have more than one?
Only one location. They ended up opening a second location with Daniel Dares, a very famous BMX rider, on the East Coast about a year after we separated. And they still have the two locations.
So, what I've experienced with not all, but most kind of individual operations like that go on to have 3 and 4 and 5 locations, it loses that initial appeal. Like there's nothing like the original shop. It's hard to recreate. Was that the experience with the East Coast shop?
I think it has been for them. It definitely has been, especially around that community. With even with San Diego, it's the warm weather, it's the beach, it's the sun, it's some of the best skate parks in the world. Flagships, right? That's why they're called those sort of stores and those sort of shops. I mean, we've all experienced it. Think of just about any retail business that's out there, and they have one or two stores that are like, man, if you like this store, you should go see this one. And I think that's why they do it, right? It's for experiences and for those sort of things that you see with that retail world.
Did you all have discussions on, opening up 10 or 100 or 1,000 shops around the world?
No, it was never really that conversation. I think through experiences of doing that is, yeah, you could replicate that, and that's how you can create a franchise, but it wouldn't be anything we would exactly would have wanted to own, because at the end of the day, no one's going to treat your business like you treat your own business. And I think we see that with a lot of franchises, whether it's gyms or fast food places or any, not restaurants that do that, right? Some of them are amazing, and you can go to the next one and be like, man, that's pretty shit. Like,
Right.
man, that just ruined my experience that I've had from a different one, which is difficult. And it all really comes down to what that owner's been able to establish, how he's been able to spend me, whether it's the corporate message. And some of them have been able to do that phenomenally well. I think it just depends on how that branding and how that corporation is from the top, and how that's trickled down, which again, sometimes it works really well and other times can be found to be most difficult. So for us, it was never really a massive conversation. I think it was just, let's do this, let's see how far this can go. And like any industry, it's been quite cyclical, to where it's done really good for a few years and then it kind of comes back and dips down, and the new kids come into the sport and that kind of continues to change. But I think with a sport like that, as long as you have, new, fresh and kids coming into it, that's the important thing. And I think that's why I'm so focused on that with golf right now, and helping out more of the junior side and focusing on that niche, along with the putting and back to basics and the game development, is the fact that there's always going to be new ones. And as long as you provide that good experience early on, they're going to stay in the game. They're going to continue to play as well.
So, when you left Scooter Farm and you're starting the new business, back to basics, what would you say the biggest lesson you took from the old business? If you had to pick one, obviously 1,000 things you learned, but the one thing that you brought into the new business.
Inventory control.
Hmm.
And it's still something that I continue to battle with and focus on, because it's so easy to get into the aspect of, I want to launch these new products. This is what I want to do. But I continue to run out of my primary product. It's a massive disservice to my business when I'm doing that, that I'm not putting more of my time and energy to make sure what got me here stays here. And that's the big one. And it's a major focus for 2024 for the company. Even this year, there's multiple times where we ran out globally, and it just can't happen. It just cripples you, especially if you're out for 2 or 3 months at a time with production schedules and shipping and those sort of things. That was the big thing, and that was even with the previous business was, you know, 20% of your products are going to make 80% of your revenue. I mean, it's
Sure.
just, I mean, the 80/20 rule is so important in your
Universal, right?
life. I mean, it is. I mean, literally everything that you do, that output seems to continue to match. And that's where I've put a lot of that focus on making sure, hey, this needs to be perfect and make sure it's done right as we continue to progress.
So I'm going to call that the practical thing you brought from the old business. What was the philosophical thing you brought from the old business?
Things take time. That's probably the biggest one. Is been a 5-year plan and a 5-year journey. This is year 4 into the golf brand, and it's really, really now starting to come to fruition. Fortunate enough to have Cameron Smith. Those who know, he's the guy with the mullet. He's very famous in the golf world and industry, and even outside of that, people know who he is. But he started working with us when he had just barely got on the, he'd be on the PGA Tour for a short period of time. And as we've developed, he's kind of developed, and now he's a multi-million dollar, one of the best players in the world, one of the top richest sports athletes in the world. And it's pretty crazy just to see how that journey develops and things kind of happen over time. And very fortunate to have someone like that side. But that was been the big thing is to me is things take time, put in the right pieces now, and everything should hopefully come to fruition later in the journey.
What would you say? I spent a lot of time in real estate, and I watched a lot of real estate careers start and end. And I watched the kind of the big dogs will say stick around. And I did it for 15 or 20 years. And it got to where I never spent any money on advertising. It started out as kind of a part-time thing with me along with building and the other stuff. But eventually it just feeds itself, and it's purely due to longevity. That's it. It's repeat customers. It's just everyone knows that's what you do. I still get calls. It's been 4 or 5 years since I actively done real estate. I still get calls. So how much would you attribute that, patience, we'll say things take time, to just awareness and just people kind of recalibrating to that's what Nick does now. So that's the brand.
Yeah, and it's the flywheel aspect as well, too, right? Is the more people that have the products, the more that begin to share it on Instagram, the more people that share their stories when they're out playing golf on a Sunday afternoon. It's just like the scooter business, right? Wow, that's awesome. Where did you buy it? Next thing you know, the whole neighborhood has it. But you've got to plant enough of those seeds for that wheel to continue to pick up for you. And one of the biggest things I did for myself was the product that created was I patented it. So it would have been super easy for that product to get replicated, which happens in golf all the time. If someone just goes and makes it on AliExpress or any of these sort of things, and then it gets sold for a quarter of the price because manufacturers don't care if they're selling thousands of them, they're making 10 cents on each one. Doesn't matter to them, right? Because they are the producers of it. But for my side of things, it was that protection and it was that continual showing up for customers, which if you go on Back to Basics Golf and you go to our website or you go to Amazon, you read the reviews, it's how amazing the packaging was, how good the customer service is. How amazing the packaging was, how good the customer service is. Repeated over and over and over because every time I respond to a customer, I treat them like they were the very first one. Someone complains, take care of them. 100 out of 10,000 are going to complain, but those 100 people, if you don't take care of them, they're going to tell 10,000 people.
Right.
So it's very important at the end of the day. If you know what, if they're not happy, and we all have those people in all aspects of life, you know what, like, man, this guy is just on another level compared to any of the other experiences that I've had with customers. Just take care of them. Just it's not worth it. It's not worth my time and energy. It's not worth the complaints. And there's only a few of them out there. So, and I only get a handful of returns anyway. So at the end of the day, sure, here's your money back. It took too long to get there. May have damaged in shipment, stuff that's completely out of my control, but I'll take care of you. And that begins to, that begins to get told within the story as well too. And if you do enough of those, they come back and you turn those people into 5-star customers. And that's why I've just never it comes back to the whole road rage thing, right? At the end of the day, it's like, man, who knows what kind of day this person's having? Just get out of their way. Like, it's not worth dealing with it. It's not, who knows what this could turn into. And I think that just comes back to how I've lived a life more peacefully on the road nowadays.
Sure.
Just, you know what, just let it go like water. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. Trust me, there's days that it's like, oh, but you got to get through that sort of thing. And I think that kind of adds to that flywheel is enough of that begins to be like, oh, all right, I can see all these little stones I've turned is now starting to build a little hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about the Rodric thing, and it reminds me of that. I don't know if it might have been a Dale Carnegie story, but he's on the subway, and this guy's kids are going nuts, running all over the subway, and he's like, why don't you control your kids? He screams at him, and the guy says, their mom just passed away, and they don't know how to deal with it, and I don't think I do either. Like, I think about that all the time. It's
Yeah.
you don't know what kind of days. I mean, and maybe they're just an asshole. That's possible too. But either way, is it
Which is
worth your
probably more likely, let's be honest.
is
But
it worth
yeah,
your
but
energy? That's it.
no, no,
Yeah,
it's
I
not.
think, and that kind of leads me to my next question. I was on a call earlier today, and this fellow wants to start his own business. You and I talk like, well, we went out and started some businesses, and that was great, and they did good. But for a lot of people, they never take that step, right? And I've found that the only difference between you and I, people way ahead of us, is that we have the same fears, we have the same saboteur, we have the same inner critic, we have the same thing telling us that we're going to be failures and people are going to laugh at us and all the things, but we still do it. That's the only difference. What has driven you to take that step?
I think it comes where we're from, Rod. I think that has a lot to do with it at the end of the day is, we grew up in a place to where, my family, we're from the Midwest, Michigan, Ohio border area. And most likely you were either going to work in a farm or a factory, which happens to a lot. There's some odds and end jobs. Okay, maybe you're going to go work in a restaurant or, you could be whether it's becoming a welder or, a chippy was what they call here, or a carpenter. Maybe you're going to build houses. All right. Either way, it's going to be a shitload of manual labor. And for me, no, I have no problem, getting my hands dirty and doing a few things, but to where a lot of my family I saw wasn't the life that I really wanted to live. I didn't want that predetermined, this is what you had to do, this is where you're going to live, you're just going to get a family and you're going to live in this silo meadows, right? No offense, great neighborhood,
Haven't
but
been there since last weekend.
but you know what I'm saying, right? It's just that it's that
Yeah.
thing of like I just did not want that for my own personal life growing up, and moved away at 18 years old and just said, you know what, there's something different out there. I've got to do something different. I want to write my own story, and I've never looked back since. And there's been a lot of fast failures, and there's been some things that worked out phenomenally well. But for me, it's that journey part of thing that has been really important. And I think that comes down to early risks and taking chance of traveling, seeing new places, whether it's the town over from yours, whether it's the city that's, 3 hours away, or the state that's 6 or 7, or what, the country that's a flight. It's very, very eye-opening to see how different people can live and how much choice there really is in the world to eventually look back and say, I did it my way, is something that was just really important to me. And I don't think that's in everybody. I do not think that's in everybody. I think that you've got to have a strong enough why to be able to choose to do that. And it's just taking those first steps. And it's taking steps every single day of, hey, here's this goal that's, 1,000 miles away, but I'm knowing what each mile, 500, 250, 100 is. And it took a while to figure that out to get to that goal that's 1,000 miles away. Yeah, it's there. Fuck, there's a lot of stuff to do, but how do I walk each mile in between to get there, and working it backwards of what you want to do, and then deciding if that's strong enough for you personally to be able to do that. So bit of a long answer there, but it's something that I'm passionate about and I do think about all the time.
Yeah. I think that obviously I believe in your why a lot. It's number one on the waves method for a reason. And for me, why, the A in waves is authenticity, is because so many times it's the point of the book. It's the point of everything I do, and I don't think I've shared with you what the name of this thing's going to be, and it's still a working title. So this may sound really off if you listen to this 5 years from now, but it's right map, wrong mountain. And it's these people are given a map to work at Jeep and retire if you're from where we're from, but it's not the mountain they want to be. They get to the top of that mountain, but it was the wrong mountain the whole time. And I think it's just asking that question at a successively earlier age, that what if my whole life was wrong principle,
Yeah.
that's what I want for people. And so I'm curious, you talk about this goal that's 1,000 miles away. How much are you prescribing each of those steps at 900, 800, 700, 600? And how much of it is, I know where I want to go and I'm open to how I get there?
I know where I want to go and I'm open on how I want to get there. And a lot of that comes down to, and I'm getting better at this all the time, right? Like it's always a work in progress. I'm nowhere near perfect at it. Consistently working on my mindset. I'm always thinking about better ways I can do. I use Trello a lot. So what I can do for my organizational steps of here's this thing I have to do. What are all the steps to kind of get there? And 80 to 90% of the time, I'm really good at it. But then other parts of the time, I might forget or I come back. And that's just where I just got to be kind to myself, be like, all right, cool, reset. And that can happen when things change in life and those sort of things. But for me, it's always been and really does come down a lot to what are the couple things I can just do today to move my business or life forward. So cool. Whether it's, today I can go to Pilates, tomorrow I can go do a HIIT class, the day after that I can do a walk. That's my health, right? And physical health. What can I do? One thing today that helps me be a healthier person towards that future life I want to live. You know what? This week, I'm not going to drink alcohol unless I have it on Friday or Saturday. I'm, are in the relationship, you know what, we're going to plan one date night a week. So it comes down to all these, 7 areas of life that, we can kind of look at. That's a whole nother conversation, but, whether it's mindset, physical, relationships, those sort of things that I can continue to get a little bit better at. But I just try to do, what are 3 things I can do on my business today? All right, cool. Let me check my Amazon listings. You know what? I'm finally ready to get my products on eBay. Let me go on to Upwork and find somebody who's going to help me do that, which Upwork, huge, big advocate, helps out a lot in life when you need to get things done and find people to do it. Or Fiverr is another one
Mhm.
for those listening that you can do as well too. So what are just a couple things I can do to move forward? Let me check my inventory. Let me get in with my factories. Maybe I improve an insert or my packaging that I'm doing. Or you know what? Let me plan my reels out for the week. These are all, and I mean, this can go on and on and on, but at the end of the day, I just try to be what are 2 or 3 things that at the end of the day, you know what? I feel pretty good that I got those things done and I can sleep well tonight, knowing that, oh my God, there's 1,000 things to do. How am I going to do it all? Well, you can't. But if you do 3 things a day for 30 days, that's 90 things you just did to improve your business or your life. So that's really how I approach it most of the time.
Yeah. I think there's, my journal comes out in December, and that's one of the things in it is the every day you check in and what's the right next thing. And you list those down, and then you list down the action steps for that day. And at the end of the day, you have to check the box. Did I touch on my right next thing in these 3 areas today? Then every 14 days there's another check-in, et cetera. But I think that just that mentality, that 1% better. And here's these areas that I need to improve in. I do check-ins, like kind of like the genius wheel looking thing. Like, how bumpy is my wheel, right? Am I a level 3 or a level 10 at this thing? Well, then I need to, is my health slipping because I just spent 6 weeks in Europe eating, chocolate in Brussels? Yeah, maybe I need to go for a run today. So I get it. So when you're focusing on that thing for your business, your life, whatever it is, do you believe that there's you wake up every day with a certain amount of creativity and mental capacity to complete things? And do you find that there's a window of time that you have to get those done, or else it's not happening that day?
I'm getting better at that, but I'm a morning person. So it's really easy for me to get up in the morning and get a bunch of stuff done. At the end of the day, I'll go to the gym or I'll go play some golf. And that's what I think for me is I've always been a firm believer. And I think some of the most quote unquote successful or large entrepreneurs out there, whether the Musks or the Bezoses or the Zuckerbergs, that you have a finite amount of energy. And that comes down to amount of decisions that you can make a day. So for me, it's morning is when I really focus a lot on my work or try to get as much as I can done.
What one piece of advice would you give those folks who are, you know, they have a successful business, they kind of say, is this all there is? They have that bit of a sinking feeling in the mornings. Should I get bigger? Should I get smaller? Should I do something different? What one piece of advice would you give that person?
Your network is your net worth is the big one, right? So I've gone through multiple phases of my life to where I have had masterminds or people around me. And probably one of the biggest transitions I had as I moved from the Gold Coast of Australia to Melbourne back in December, and where I can get on the phone and have chats like this with people like yourself. Been difficult so far to find that around here in a local environment. So the more that you're able to do that or be around others that are just a few steps ahead of you or a few steps behind maybe where you want to be is really important, because one, it allows you to give back to what you've learned to others that are on a similar journey, but it also allows you to learn from others. So I've always liked to be kind of that middle person in the room when it comes to those sort of things and getting around other people. So that's a big one, is just really getting in a supportive network or people that are in your corner is extremely important. It is a very lonely business being an entrepreneur and going on these things on your own. It's your own journey, it's your own business. No one knows exactly what you're going through except for possibly other people that are following a similar journey, though it may not be exactly the same as your own. And just those few steps every day. I mean, that's the biggest one, right? You want to start your own business, you want to do these things. What are a couple things I can do every day to move me towards that goal? And bite-sized chunks is so much easier, whether it's information or content that you're sharing with your community or stuff that you're taking in or implementing yourself, is the biggest things that I've found that attribute to me being able to handle this madness day in and day out.
Buddy, I appreciate you being on the show today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.